There is a geological formation in Arizona that tourists visit by the millions every year, and almost none of them see what is actually in front of them. The Grand Canyon is presented to the public as a natural wonder, carved over millions of years by the Colorado River cutting through rock layers. The official geological narrative is taught in schools, repeated in documentaries, accepted without question by most people who stand at the rim and look down into the vast expanse. But if you look carefully at the walls of the canyon, if you examine the actual structure of how the stone has been cut, something becomes apparent that the official narrative does not adequately explain. The walls of the Grand Canyon contain evidence of systematic, geometric excavation. There are terraces cut into the rock walls. There are flat surfaces that follow no geological logic. There are regular patterns that suggest intentional human work rather than natural erosion. And the fundamental question that emerges is simple and difficult to ignore. Water does not cut steps. I came to this question through direct observation that contradicted what I had been taught. Standing at various points along the rim, looking down at different sections of the canyon walls, the geometric regularity of the step patterns becomes apparent. The terraces are too uniform, the steps are too consistent, the flat surfaces are too precisely level. Water erosion produces rounded, irregular forms, as it follows the path of least resistance, working around harder and softer stone differently. Water does not produce geometric regularity. It does not cut steps. The official explanation for the Grand Canyon's formation states that the Colorado River, over approximately 6 million years, cut downward through successive layers of rock, progressively deepening the canyon as the river flowed toward the sea. This explanation accounts for the vertical depth of the canyon. What it does not adequately explain is the specific morphology of the canyon walls, the way the stone has been removed, the patterns visible in how the excavation was accomplished. The focus of geological attention has been on vertical erosion, but the canyon walls show evidence of systematic horizontal excavation, of material being removed in geometric patterns that follow no natural logic. Consider the Redwall limestone formation, one of the most prominent features in the Grand Canyon. It is a distinctive reddish-brown limestone layer that extends throughout much of the canyon and that is relatively resistant to erosion compared to the softer rocks above and below it. But in certain sections, particularly where the Bright Angel Trail and other major routes descend into the canyon, the red wall appears to be cut with regular step patterns. These steps are not random features created by differential erosion of harder and softer layers. They are systematic, regular, and geometric. In a properly constructed stairway or quarry operation, steps are designed with consistent rise and run the vertical height of each step, and the horizontal depths of each step are uniform. This design principle makes the stairs usable and the quarrying operation efficient. If you measure the steps visible in sections of the red wall, you find that they approximate this geometric consistency. The rise is relatively uniform. The run is relatively uniform. The steps are not perfectly consistent. Rock composition and fracturing affects the exact dimensions, but the overall pattern shows clear evidence of geometric planning. The Grand Canyon is not unique in showing evidence of geometric patterns that do not fit the standard geological narrative of water erosion. Throughout the American Southwest, in Utah's Goblin Valley, in Nevada's Valley of Fire, in Colorado's Mesa Verde geological formations, display similar features that suggest systematic excavation or modification. The fact that these features are observed in multiple locations, in formations of different geological ages and composition, suggests a pattern that transcends simple coincidence or local geological processes. Understanding why these step patterns are not seriously investigated or explained requires understanding the system of authority and narrative control that shapes official geology and archaeology. The official narratives are not simply descriptive. They are constructed to serve particular interests and to foreclose particular alternative interpretations. The narrative that the Grand Canyon is a purely natural geological formation created by water erosion over millions of years is maintained through the authority of academic geology and archaeology. Alternative interpretations are marginalized as fringe, as lacking scientific credibility, as not worthy of serious investigation. The question of ancient habitation in the Grand Canyon is directly relevant. If the canyon was inhabited by human populations for extended periods, those populations would have needed to navigate the canyon walls. They would have needed to access water, which is available only along the Colorado River and at a few springs on the walls. The step patterns visible in the canyon walls could represent access routes created over thousands of years by human populations moving through the canyon, but the steps show evidence of intentional shaping with tools. They are not simply worn into the rock by repeated passage. They are cut into the rock with geometric regularity. John Wetherill, a pioneering explorer in the southwest in the early 20th century, reported finding evidence of ancient cliff dwellings and structures in remote sections of the Grand Canyon. Wetherill's reports were documented in contemporary sources, but they were never systematically investigated or incorporated into the official archaeological understanding of the canyon. Wetherill's materials and findings were reportedly acquired by the Smithsonian Institution, but they have not been made available for independent verification. The suppression or non-investigation of evidence of ancient structures in the Grand Canyon is itself significant. If such evidence exists, and if it was found by reputable explorers and documented in contemporary sources, the question becomes, why has this evidence not been properly investigated? The role of the Smithsonian Institution in maintaining official narratives about the American past is particularly important to understand. The Smithsonian, through its various museums and research centers, has enormous authority over how the American past is understood. The institution controls access to many archaeological artifacts and materials. It controls funding for archaeological research. It controls publications through institutional journals and museum publications. It sets the standards for what counts as credible archaeological evidence and credible interpretation. The Smithsonian's history includes documented instances of suppressing or marginalizing evidence that did not fit official narratives. When reports of ancient structures or quarrying operations were made that did not fit official narratives, the Smithsonian either acquired the materials and removed them from circulation or encouraged other institutions to do so. The effect has been to maintain official narratives while suppressing contradictory evidence. What the step patterns in the Grand Canyon might actually represent is worth considering carefully. The most straightforward interpretation is that they represent evidence of ancient quarrying operations. The geometric regularity, the systematic nature, the evidence of cutting and shaping, all of these are consistent with quarrying. Ancient populations identified limestone as a valuable material. They organized quarrying operations to extract it. They developed tool technology and organizational systems capable of undertaking massive excavation. If this interpretation is correct, the question becomes, where was the quarried stone transported? What structures were built with Grand Canyon limestone? Is there evidence of Grand Canyon limestone in ancient structures elsewhere in North America? No such investigation has been undertaken. Or if it has been undertaken, the results have not been published in mainstream archaeological or geological literature. Another possible interpretation is that the step patterns represent ancient access routes. Populations living in or regularly visiting the Grand Canyon would have needed to navigate the canyon walls to access water and resources at the bottom. They might have deliberately cut and maintained access routes, creating steps in the canyon walls to make traversal easier and safer. Over extended periods, these routes would have been deepened and regularized as they were used and maintained. A third possible interpretation is that the step patterns represent systematic modification of the canyon landscape by populations that occupied the canyon intensively. The modification could have had multiple purposes: to facilitate access, to create level areas for habitation or cultivation, to quarry useful stone, to manage water flow. The geometric patterns could reflect the integration of multiple functional purposes into a coordinated system of landscape modification. Each of these interpretations has different implications for understanding the past, but all of them share a common feature. They all suggest that the Grand Canyon shows evidence of sustained, sophisticated human activity. All of them contradict the official narrative that the canyon was not significantly inhabited or modified by ancient populations. All of them suggest that investigation into the step patterns would produce results incompatible with the official narrative. This is why investigation is not happening. The absence of investigation is not accidental. It is the result of institutional mechanisms that channel investigation toward questions that support official narratives and away from questions that would challenge them. Grant funding is directed toward projects that fit within mainstream understanding. Academic journals are more likely to publish research that fits within mainstream understanding. Academic careers are advanced through research that supports mainstream understanding. The result is that questions that would produce results challenging the official narrative are simply not investigated. The suppression operates through the allocation of resources, through the establishment of what counts as credible research and credible findings. through the career incentives that reward conformity to official understanding and penalize deviation from it. The effect is that alternative interpretations of evidence are not produced, not published, not incorporated into academic understanding. The official narrative is protected from challenge not by suppressing evidence, but by preventing the investigation that would produce alternative interpretations. If the step patterns were confirmed to be the results of systematic ancient quarrying or excavation, it would imply the existence of ancient populations capable of sophisticated toolwork and large-scale coordinated projects. It would imply organizational structures capable of supporting long-term projects requiring substantial labor and resources. It would imply knowledge of geometry and engineering. It would imply the possibility of long-distance trade in heavy materials. All of these implications would require revision to the official narrative of ancient North American civilization as relatively simple and locally adapted societies. The institutional suppression of alternative narratives about the past serves important functions. It maintains the authority of institutions to determine what counts as true about the past. It prevents the mobilization of alternative explanations that might challenge the political and economic order. If it were widely understood that indigenous populations had built sophisticated civilizations capable of large-scale projects, that they had organized themselves in complex ways, that they had accomplished remarkable engineering feats, the political implications would be significant. The Grand Canyon step patterns remain visible, documented, photographed, observable to anyone who visits the canyon and looks carefully, yet they remain unexplained within the official geological narrative. The questions they raise remain unanswered. The investigation that would explain them is not happening. What the patterns actually represent, whether ancient quarrying, ancient access routes, or systematic landscape modification, cannot be determined without serious investigation. But the investigation is not happening. The pattern of maintaining official narratives through non-investigation operates throughout institutional understanding of history. The official understanding of Egyptian pyramids, of Stonehenge, of pre-Columbian North American civilization, all are maintained through institutional authority and selective attention. Evidence contradicting official narratives is not suppressed in the sense of being completely eliminated. It is marginalized, not investigated, treated as not credible. Understanding the Grand Canyon in this way is a formation that shows evidence of ancient human modification that remains uninvestigated and unexplained, opens toward a broader understanding of how official narratives about the past are maintained. The suppression is not primarily through active hiding of evidence. The suppression is primarily through the prevention of investigation into evidence that would produce alternative interpretations. This mechanism of narrative maintenance operates throughout institutional understanding of history. The official narratives fill the space that should be occupied by genuine investigation and understanding. The narratives are presented with authority and confidence, but they are not based on complete investigation of available evidence. They are based on selective attention to evidence that fits the narrative and systematic non-investigation of evidence that does not fit. The step patterns in the Grand Canyon walls remain. They are visible to anyone who looks carefully. They do not fit the official geological explanation. They suggest alternative possibilities: ancient quarrying, ancient access routes, systematic landscape modification by populations more sophisticated than the official narrative acknowledges. Until these patterns are seriously investigated, until alternative explanations are seriously considered, the history of the Grand Canyon will remain incomplete. The truth about what the patterns represent will remain unknown. But the non-investigation itself is revealing. It tells us something important about how power operates in contemporary institutions, about how official narratives are maintained, about what becomes invisible through the systematic non-investigation of inconvenient evidence. It tells us that there are truths about the past that institutions have interest in keeping suppressed. Water does not cut steps. The geometric patterns visible in the Grand Canyon walls represent human work. What ancient populations undertook this work, what purposes they served, what knowledge and capabilities they possessed, these questions remain unanswered. They remain unanswered not because the evidence is insufficient, but because the investigation is not happening. The evidence is visible. The questions are clear. The investigation that would provide answers is systematically prevented through institutional mechanisms that serve particular interests in maintaining official narratives. The step patterns in the Grand Canyon remain, waiting to be explained. They are waiting for the investigation that would reveal what they represent. Until that investigation happens, until the official silence is broken and the questions are seriously asked, the Grand Canyon will remain a mystery, a vast geological formation, with evidence of ancient human work cut into its walls, evidence that official institutions have chosen not to investigate, not to explain, not to incorporate into the narratives they maintain about the past.